Boulevard. Ali, Carrell, Hasnain, thank you so much for joining me on this very first episode of 786 Boulevard. And of course, it is quite a solemn occasion given the fact that, the world right now is just so damn crazy. As I was just mentioning to you guys before we started, everything that's happening in America right now, I'm just watching, on Twitter, on my TV screen. And even then, it's really hard to fathom. You guys, all three of you, are in New York right now on the ground. So before we get into the artistic element of this episode, where we speak about films and TVs that kind of inspire us, if you can let us know, maybe Ali, you first, what exactly is happening right now on the ground in New York City?
Well, right now, everyone's very upset with not only just the killing of George Floyd recently, but more so over the systemic racism that's been going on for so many years. And it feels like every time someone gets killed, it comes up for a little bit and then dies back down, and then it comes up and then dies back down. So now this is the most I've seen it as far as the most violent, the most aggressive. It's totally unreal. We have curfew that starts at 8 p.m. in a city that never sleeps. So you can imagine what it feels like being here and having to run home. I've never had to worry about a curfew before. So it's just, it's unreal, it's intense, and unfortunately it's very inhumane, the things that are happening.
Hasnain, have you seen any of the protests? Have you been in the thick of it? What was kind of like the
Uh,
emotion?
yeah, so actually last weekend me and Ali were together when we were in by Central Park, and it was a semi-protest, which was kind of quiet, but you can see a lot of anger in everybody's faces. Um, Me being in Queens, which is like significantly diverse, I live in a very um, black neighborhood. African Americans on one side, Hispanics on the other side, South Asians on the other side. And there's been protests by the globe. I live by Flushing Meadow Park, where it's like a globe, and I work out there. And I went there to go check out the protests, and it was relatively calm, but that's because I'm in a calm, quiet neighborhood. But you can see like anger and frustration in people's faces, not just African Americans, but like anybody. Pakistanis, Indians, Hispanics, whites. They're all out there.
Hmm. It's interesting because in the intro that I recorded before I joined you guys, I was talking about how I know all minorities right now are upset, right? But personally, what I would say is, as a British Pakistani, there is no way I can even begin to fathom how African Americans right now feel. And before we started, Carell was just speaking about even the differences between African Americans and Black people in Colombia, and kind of like the different experiences that they face. So Carell, like right now you're in New York City, you were in Colombia. Can you tell us right now how you're feeling? Seeing these protests. You moved to New York. I'm guessing for work, very different lifestyle, and right now you're seeing this craziness unfold in front of you. How does it make you feel right now?
Well, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good because it's a person, right? It's a black man. But for me, I'm living in Yonkers right now, Yonkers, New York. So I'm surrounded by a lot of African American, a lot of black people around me. So I handle with them every day. Um, for me, even the act what that white policeman did was a bad, it was a bad action. But for me, it's not about only the African American.
Mm,
For me, it doesn't matter if you are white, you are black, you are Spanish, you are Haitian, or you come from the Middle East. We are all human beings.
mm,
But sometimes, like for me, it's what I'm thinking right now. But sometimes I just don't say that because some people can get what I say like wrong.
mm,
But I feel like hypocrisy sometimes because African American kill each other out there every day by gun, right? by ganga, by drugs, but that's not a big deal. But when a white man murder a black man, it's like a big deal, and everybody start to wow, 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 screaming. You know what I'm trying to say? Uh, it's a bad thing, and I don't feel and I don't feel good because if you asking a Black American, African American men about this anger they have inside, they say no, it's because of the history, it's because of the slavery, right? In Colombia, we were a slave as well, but you can spend your whole life living with this anger, this anger and trying to uh, I don't know how to say that, to point everybody for that and got an attitude and go in the street with this attitude like everybody own me, so don't look at me, because a lot of people say that, hey, don't look at me because you are black, and they all the time feel attacked, and I know this. They have been mistreated for years, and it's not easy to say then like, hey, don't feel that way. No, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all time said in Quran, in the Holy Quran, and reminds you, uh, be smart and wise. Okay, you have to protest, you have to stand up against the oppressor, right? Like Imam Hussein alayhi salam stand up against Yazid ibn Muayyad al-Natura alayhi, right? We can be shy against the oppressor in this case, but you gotta protest it wisely, no looting and breaking and burning everything, and I'm disagree with that part of you gotta protest. Okay, let's protest, but we gotta be smart about it. You know what I'm trying
Yeah,
to say?
I understand what you're saying. I think, it's obviously a very, very complicated issue. It's not something that, we can kind of like solve here between the four of us. But, one thing I'm very interested in, Hasnain, you mentioned that you live in Queens and New York, and hopefully we'll move on to the main part of this episode, which is discussing certain films and TV shows that have inspired us on this issue. But just before we get into that, you mentioned you lived in a very African American neighborhood, Hasnain. What have you kind of like seen of the oppression in Queens and around Queens, and of, for example, friends that you might have, experiences that you've been told, for people that you've gone to school with, that you work with, because it's crazy sometimes. I've seen interviews where African Americans speak about the fact that they're scared that when they go leave their house and get in their cars, that they'll be pulled over and shot by police for the wrong reason. So, like, have you heard any of those kind of stories, Hasnain? Is there anything that you can tell us based on what you've seen and who you've spoken to?
Yeah. Oh,
sorry, Carrell.
you want me?
I want, if I could get Hasnain to answer this first, and then we'll move on.
Yeah. So, middle school and high school, I literally went to my neighborhood. So, I made friends with a lot of African Americans, Hispanics. That's kind of the dominant ethnicities here. So a lot of my friends that I grew up with, we kind of we kind of got together with basketball and stuff like that. So I kind of grew up in like the basketball culture, the Jordan culture, and what people say today is basically the black culture, right? Like the getting nice kicks, getting styles, playing basketball, hanging out. So, a lot of my friends that I grew up with, it's oppression by the police because gentrification happened. Growing up in the area that I grew up in, it was a very impoverished neighborhood. But today, you see these houses go for over $1 million, right? So I think ever since gentrification started happening and people that are not African American or Hispanic started moving into my neighborhood, that's kind of where police involvement got higher, and that's kind of where they saw a lot of the oppression happening. They have like a police station that's posted up now, a few blocks away from my house, which never happened before. There used to be a lot of music videos being shot because I live by Left Rack City, which is a lot of rappers come here to shoot. So some of the oppression that I see now is just you see cops patrolling in the past several years in my neighborhood just because of gentrification, right? Because it's all about the money, unfortunately, and that's kind of what it hurts. But there's also one thing else I want to mention, which I think goes along with the oppression, not just by the police, but just by society as a whole that happens to my friends, right? So I went to school with African Americans. I grew up with them. They're my friends. They're my boys. I I hit him up every now and then. We'll hang out. But here's the thing. All of us graduated from the same middle school. All of us graduated from the same high school. When it came to college, we all went our separate ways, but we all went to college. Now, with that degree, I got a job. You know, I got a good job. I got a good job that can provide for my household. They didn't get the same opportunity, but with the same degree. To me, that's oppression too. You see what I'm saying? If me and my friend who's African American got a finance degree, and no matter which college they went to, I mean, I went to a private university, they went to, you know, a public university, but because they didn't get the same opportunity as me and we had the same interview, like that to me is also oppression too. So it's a one layer where now the police are coming in and now they're looking at these African Americans, like they're basically spying on them, making sure what their next move is. But even society doesn't help them either, because how do you expect a group of people to move up in society, better themselves, if society itself is not allowing them to? But then these individuals, like my best friend works at 7-Eleven. He has a college degree, but he works at 7-Eleven. And I've tried to help him many of times. You know, I tried to help him 2-3 times. It just society just doesn't give them a chance. So you know, that's kind of what I see in Queens with my friends here. You know, it's oppression upon oppression. It's one, you're African American. It's two, you're not being fairly treated when it comes to opportunities. That's kind of what I see here.
So moving on, I mean, obviously that's very heartbreaking, and like I said, I can't begin to imagine it. I'm sure, you know, for you it's different because you grew up amongst this, and you know, like you said, there's a certain disparity there, which is obvious, and you know, it might even mess with your mind a bit. The fact that you, based on the color of your skin, have, you know, surpassed what they're able to achieve, specifically, you know, just because of the color of the skin. And it really is quite heartbreaking and depressing. Moving on to the main crux of this episode and just generally the podcast. As I mentioned in the intro, this is quite a confusing podcast because we're discussing a lot of things. We're discussing film, TV, culture, art, but also spirituality and religion. And the whole idea of this podcast is to kind of like merge all these things together and try to make a good podcast out of it. Now, on a personal level, I feel very out of touch here because I'm speaking to 3 successful actors who have been in a Ridley Scott film, in Narcos season 3, and Hasnain, don't know what your credits are, but I'm sure you've been in something fantastic. And my claim to fame is basically this podcast. So as a Muslim, and Carrell, let me ask you this: as a Muslim, you know, as a practicing Muslim, Ali told me before that you're, you know, you have relatives who are deeply into religion and who are teaching religion. How, you know, what was it that really attracted you to become an actor, to get into TV? Because typically that's not something Muslims do. Carrell, what would you say to that?
Oh yeah. But before I answer that, I just want to say just a short thing about the question you were talking about with the brother Hasnain.
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 Yeah, sure, please.
Hasnain.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
So I can't talk too much about races in America because I didn't grow up here. I didn't grow up here like him. But I've been, like I said before, surrounded with a lot of African American people here in Yonkers, and I found they have like different opinion, because one of the scholars of this area, they say, okay, we have to stand up against the opposite, but why are you looting and stealing and try to burn it out everything, right? Because when you are, I know they have like a grudge, they handle the grudge, right? Like this anger inside, and when you have that anger, you become like an animal, and your behavior is gonna be like an animal. So people are not thinking about it; they just wanna blow up and want to destroy everything, right? So some African American people are disagreed with that kind of acting, and like 50% of them they are disagree with them. So yes, that's what I said, because I've been in contact, I've been in touch with them, and sometimes have an attitude, and it's like disappointment to me, because they make me feel like I'm not a black man. So what are you talking about? You're not living this bad. I'm living racing in Colombia. So as an actor in Colombia, I can deny that in Colombia are racist as well. So I can close my eyes and act like a blind and I don't see everything. No, it's racist in Colombia, but it's the way you it's the way you take it. If you take that personal, or if you try, like for example in my case, I just don't pay attention then, because for me when people are racist, it's like ignorant behavior, you know. The Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the Quran is for Arabic and not Arabic. It doesn't matter if you are white or black, because we are human beings, like I said before. So in Colombia, I remember when I start acting, a lot of people call me, "Hey, Negro, Negro, come, Negro." So
wow,
it was pretty upset to me, but I had to be smart in that time, because I was trying to get into the industry, right? So sometimes when I was a child, my dad used to say a hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam, who said, it's better remain silent and look like a fool than to open your mouth and confirm it. And when sometimes I heard, and they are not racist, like, "Oh, you are a nigger." No, but they say things like, "Oh, you are too handsome to be a black man." Or, "Oh, you are too smart to be a black man." And I say, "Excuse me?" But sometimes I feel the anger inside, but I prefer to be quiet, because if I don't have something positive to say, I prefer to be quiet. But I have that experience with that racist people in Colombia when I was in my beginning, right? When I was started. But now I got a name, you know, I got a name like Carrell Lasso, okay, Narco, Netflix. So when I get into I met them in a reunion, in a meeting, they are different. "Oh, Mr. Carrell, Mr. Lasso, how you doing?" Now you treat me like that because I have a name?
because you found success, they treat you differently. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, success. But when I was nobody for them, they treat me like, "Oh, this is one more nigga." You know, is difficult. But now I'm sorry. So now answer your question. Why I decided to become an actor? I don't know. I think we were born with a gift. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us gift. And I remember when I was a child, I used to say lies, and I was pretty good. Everybody believed me. Everybody believed me when I tried to make lies. And I grew up surrounded by almost my mother relative. They are artists. My uncle played the guitar. My aunts, they are singers. So I raised surrounded and raised. I'm sorry for my English, though.
No, please carry on.
I grew up surrounded by artists. So I'm a musician. When I finished my high school, I went to the college and I started to study music. So I'm pianist. I play the guitar, I play the guitar bass. And after that, when I finished that, I'm start to get interested about the acting. So I went to school and I get prepared as an actor. I'm start my way. I'm start my career. As a Muslim, it's funny because a lot of people say, "Okay, you are." I'm sorry, I wanna open the door. My wife is right.
No worries.
All right. So sometimes is oh my God, I'm sorry. Sometimes it's funny because people think because you are Muslim, you are like a weird. But no, in my case, it's a way to make tabligh. It's a way to make dua, because, you know, in Colombia, it's not common to get halal food. It's pretty difficult. You gotta sacrifice the animal by yourself, but it's not a store. Then you can go to the supermarket and get a halal meat or something like that. No. So my menu is different. So I always have in the catering, in the lunch time when we are working, when we are shooting, they say like, "Okay, this is food is for Carrell, and we're gonna have fish." And on the another actors ask me like, "Why your menu is different?"
Wow.
You are the
Mm.
president right now. Why? So
Mm.
that's the moment when I start to explain them what happened. So I
So
start
for
to
so for you, acting is really a way to do tabligh to other people.
yeah, because my behavior is different when I'm shooting. So I'm not like involved with women's around. So they are all hanging around parties. So I don't drink alcohol. So for them is, for example, in Colombia, is very weird that a men don't drink alcohol because that is pretty common. It's pretty common right there. So they is like, what? You don't drink alcohol? Why? You don't gonna drink beer? And I say no. Why? Because I'm Muslim. Muslim? And what's that? What's Muslim? So I'm
That's
gonna
very
start to
interesting.
explain then about Islam. So for me, my job is a way to make tabligh.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Ali, for you, you've when it comes to like big productions, you've been in quite a few. And what's your kind of like Muslim experience as an actor? Going into this environment, we had these kind of conversations before, and it's very interesting because sometimes I feel like it's so hard to kind of collate the Muslim identity with the Hollywood culture, which is essentially in many ways an antithesis to what Islam kind of teaches. So how do you collate the two?
Well, like Carrell said, I have the same diet issue, obviously. So when we're on set, I'll make it known that, listen, I can't do the meat. I need it to be halal if you can get that. So then people do ask. So that's, I know exactly what he's talking about. And then secondly, for me, I was able to work with a TV station that existed a while ago. It was the first English American Shia channel here. So what I was able to do there is produce some shows and actually use the Islamic perspective and do some acting and portray the message of what God would want us, in my mind, what God would want us to teach society as far as religion. But as far as on the Hollywood side, it is difficult, especially when you get work that involves either being around women and doing certain things or alcohol. So you have to turn that work down, or you have to, for example, be without a top, for example, and if I'm not doing the acting part, but I'm doing the modeling side. So it becomes difficult because you have to turn down a lot of work that you normally would have been able to get if it wasn't for Islam. But at the end of the day, this is all temporary, and I'm going to have to answer to God. So I have to keep my and do only the things that I can legally, Islamically, and let everything else go. And like, there's a hadith by Imam Ali where he talks about there's two types of thing. One is for you, and one is not for you. And no matter what you do, if it's not for you, you're not going to get it. And if it's for you, even if you're in a cave, it's going to come find you. So keep that in mind. So I don't get upset. I don't get worried about it. I'll go do an audition. If I get it, I get it. If not, then, so be it.
I do feel like the thing is, like, with Hollywood culture is in many ways, not that I'm completely aware of it, but based on what I've heard and conversations that I've had, I feel like Hollywood culture is all about the networking side of it. So, for example, networking at parties. They say that all the greatest films and castings don't happen during auditions. These relationships are built at parties. Where there's alcohol and many other things. So, like, being unable to network in those environments, how does that impact your career, or does it at all?
I think it does in a big way, because when you're in those environments, everyone's guard is down and you become more friendly with each other and you get to know each other a little bit better. But not being able to go there, you're suddenly an outsider, and we're outsiders to begin with because we're minorities. So, for example, getting a role, most likely I'm going to get a role that's playing a terrorist or some bad guy as opposed to somebody actually. But, so everyone knows that. So I think it makes it difficult.
I mean, personally, I think you're too good looking to be cast as a terrorist. That's just my own opinion.
No, man. Well, you've seen it. Never mind. Yeah.
We'll keep that one quiet. I mean, yeah, I think that is like something I just really want to explore in this podcast because, you know, like I've been alluding to, I'd consider myself a practicing Muslim, you know, somewhat spiritual, and I have this great love of film and TV, which in many ways has so many aspects to it that is just so antithetical to what Islam preaches. And what I want to do on this podcast is kind of like explore the two and how they kind of and how they, you know, match or you know, repel each other at least. Hasnain, I want to move on to the importance of depicting minority stories on film. I know this is something that you're very passionate about. Why is it important? Very simple question, but I'm sure you have a good answer for it. Why is it important to depict minority stories on film, especially right now? You know, as we see, you know, minorities, African American community specifically rising up and protesting. How does delivering a good African American narrative on TV and film help their case or help their cause? Sorry.
So a few reasons. One, because a lot of these writers and these directors are not African American telling an African American or a Muslim story. So they don't get the whole gamut because for them, it's what's sellable. That's the reason why I do films that's more related to, you know, the Muslim American experience, or like I'll have a writer who's African American because the story is more authentic there. There's no, lack of a better term, there's no whitewashing of it. You know, we've seen a lot of films that we discussed in the past where we see African American story, a Muslim American story, just be whitewashed, and it's just like, well, okay. So that's kind of why it's really important to collaborate with you know, individuals who have that story, because the story in itself is sellable. You know, you're that's the uniqueness of it. So that's kind of why, you know, I specifically specialize in things that are taboo culturally, things that are hard to tell because they need to be told. Because if we don't tell them, who is? You're gonna have somebody else who doesn't come from that background, who's just gonna imagine that scenario. I mean, you can't have a writer be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna imagine what it is to have police brutality, but I'm not black.
Yeah,
that's not authentic. That's not authentic.
It reminds me of I remember watching an interview with the producer of 24. I forget his name. I think it's Howard Schultz. It might be, but you know, I'm sure you guys know 24 is a very, very Islamic film with a lot of Islamophobic series with a lot of terrorists. Ali, I don't know if you were cast in that. But there's a lot, there's a lot of sorry, that was a low blow. I'm so sorry. You know, there's a lot of Islamophobia in that series, and one thing that was very interesting was that he said in this interview, he was like, I made a mistake because I felt like I was just telling a story and I didn't realize the impact that it had on real people and real lives. That being said, he also moved on to produce Homeland, so I don't really know what he learnt from that. But he's got a point. He's got a point, you know, like it's so, everything you tell in TV and film, millions of people watch film and TV. You know, Carrell, millions of people watched Narcos. They watched your scenes. You know, they were impacted by that show. Millions of people are, when they see a narrative on TV, they, you know, they take it in like a sponge. And unfortunately, you know, over the past few decades, perhaps recently only has died down. But before that, you know, it was very common to have, you know, the African-American sidekick in a film or a TV show who speaks a certain way, who walks a certain way, who acts a certain way. And that, unfortunately, you know, paints a really bad image of African-Americans. And I wanted to, before we conclude, I just wanted to mention a few like TV shows and films that have kind of inspired us. And, you know, what we have kind of learned from them. Hasnain, you know, you grew up in an African-American community. Tell me about a film or a TV show that really resonated with you, one that kind of depicted the African-American struggle.
So let's stick to recent films because it's easier to relate to a recent thing. So obviously Get Out, something very recent. But even if you look at other shows, you have shows like Blackish. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I haven't seen Blackish. No.
It depicts basically, you know, the family, like an African American family, and something even more close to that, especially for me as a Muslim American that knows my struggle as well as the African American struggle, is basically Riz Ahmed's series, The Night Of. You know, yes, that story depicts racism against the Muslim American. But even if you look into scenes where like he goes to jail, and he's basically grown up around African Americans who are incarcerated, in jail. So you can see the two-way street there. So that's another show that I wanted to pick, and it just tells you what's going on in both worlds, but then these shows and Get Out, these are stepping stones because they're going in the right direction. They're being told by people who know what it feels like. I forgot her name. The one who directed and written, I think Mindy Nair is the one who did the Riz Ahmed show, and then Get Out, very famous. So it's a step in the right direction, but we need to do more because you can't have the industry dominated 80% to 20%.
Yeah, no, I think The Night Of definitely deserves a podcast episode in itself, and I think something like Get Out, which was just so insanely crazy. I remember watching it for the first time and thinking I've never seen anything like this before. Specifically, forget like the second half of it where it goes into a full kind of like suspense thriller, but the first half of it, like you really get to feel. And again, like I told you before, I will never understand what it's like to be an African American or a black person in general and face all that oppression. But the first half of that film, you really feel the racism, the subtle racism that he feels. Those side comments, getting pulled over by the police, not overtly attacking him or being offensive, but just those very subtle things that make you feel so uncomfortable. And that was really well translated, which I think was amazing. Carrell, if I can bring you back in, you mentioned before we started that you were part of a show called, I believe it's The White Slave. If you can tell us a bit about that and what it kind of, the story of the Black Colombian struggle that it tells.
Oh, yeah. I was part of the cast of The White Slave and was incredible TV shows who remind us the struggle of Black people in Colombia.
Was it a show specific to Colombia or was it an American show?
No, it was for Colombia, from Santa Marta. Yeah. There's a Marta it was based in Santa Marta, and it tells about a white girl who was raised by the slaves in a Palenque. Palenque is like a small town where Black people were free. So she fight against white people to get a freedom for our Black Colombian people there. So basically, he chose the struggle and the fight we have to. So what we have to go through to get our freedom in Colombia, slavery, because it was a pretty nice show.
And why do you think
they show the white they mistreated Black people there as a slave and everything was.
Why do you think it's so important for those stories to be told?
For that story specifically?
Generally, minority stories or Black stories on film and TV.
Is the most important thing is to teach our kids we have rights and we're not different to a white boy because all time in Colombia, for example, kids growing up watching TV, but when I was a child, there's not a lot of Black actors in the Colombian TV. So kids grew up like I don't see my face portrayed on the TV because when I grew up, there wasn't like Black actors. So now when children in Colombia say, hey, I can be like him. I can be like him. So it's very important. It's very important to show the minorities, the kids, especially the children who are growing up, that we can do it. We are able to do it. We are not less than another people because we all are human beings.
That is so powerful. I think
saying Selma. Do you remember? Have you ever seen Selma?
I've seen Selma. Yeah.
About the marching on Montgomery with Martin Luther King, or as well as Malcolm X.
Yeah,
or
Malcolm
Do the
X, of
Right
course,
Thing,
timeless. Yeah.
Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee.
Mm.
That kind of film inspiring the
Mm.
people to do the right thing, and you have right, and you are not less than them. You can do the same thing because we are human beings.
No, that's beautiful. I think one thing you said, there was no one to kind of look up to on film and TV. I know Hasnain and Ali will probably relate with me on this, but like the first time, it sounds so petty, but like the first time I saw Riz Ahmed in Star Wars, I believe he was in Rogue One, and just seeing him in that film, like before then, I never thought that someone who looked like me belonged in a world like that. And as you said, Carrell, it's important because it reminds you that you are not less, rather you are equal. And I think that just shows like the power of film and TV. And Ali, before we wrap up, do you want to share with us perhaps a film or a TV show that kind of inspired you that you've seen recently? Or
Not necessarily a film, but I would say a movie that I saw a little while ago. You guys probably heard of it, called The 13th. 13th Amendment. I saw that and I learned several things that I didn't know, even though I've been around African Americans. I grew up like Hasnain. I grew up in an African American neighborhood. My high school was probably like 95% African American. So learning some of the things that were in the 13th, not the 13th Amendment, but the
13th.
the 13th. I think that was very helpful, watching that. So that stands out to me. Another thing that I wanted to, I guess, add, this new series that's been going on, the Turkish series that people are watching, Ertuğrul.
Ertuğrul, yeah. It's a phenomenon. Every Muslim in the world is watching it right now.
Yeah.
Except me, probably.
I actually finished all 5 seasons already.
Oh wow! How many episodes per season? Like 130 or something?
Yeah, so it's I think around 80 to 90 episodes each season.
Oh my god!
45 minutes.
Oh wow! Okay. And what did you learn from wasting your time watching that? I'm joking. What did you learn from watching that great show?
I learned a lot actually with that, and it gave me a lot of inspiration. I started off. It was a Turkish series. It's got what is it called? The subtitles on the bottom, which I don't like watching that. It took me a while to get used to it, but it was definitely well worth it. I learned how this guy sticks through, thick and thin, trying to do the right thing, and a lot of different. And they talk about a lot of different morals and principles and ethics. And I feel like we should do that more on an Islamic level, as opposed to just like a Turkish, for example. That's a Turkish series, but I think there should be something about early Islamic history, right after the Prophet's time, how things happened, what transpired, so everyone can learn the basics of history that happened then. And then maybe even fast forward a little bit to Karbala and talk about what happened with Imam Hussein and actually make that a movie. And I think that would be inspirational for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it just really takes Muslims to get into the right positions in filmmaking and producing and be able to and make these kind of stories. As we have seen, it took African Americans who are passionate about film and TV to get into this industry and start making films like Spike Lee, as Carrell mentioned, and so many others. Ava, apologies, I completely forgot her second name, but she directed 13th, which you mentioned, and also When They See Us, which is a show that I did want to speak about a lot, but we don't have much time left. But these are examples of people coming forward and telling the stories of their community and bringing the stories of their community to the world, which is so important. As the final question to ask each of you, Carrell, I'll ask you. As let's say an outsider who's currently in America watching all this unfold, Carrell, what do you think is next for America from here? Very tough question, but hopefully you have an answer. Sorry, Carrell, I think you're
on mute.
well. Yeah, you're on mute. Let me unmute you.
Sorry.
No worries. No, you're good. Go ahead.
What's next? I don't really know what's next. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for it because that's the expectative right now. Because a lot of Black people is like standard, showing out for our rights, and I'm just waiting. I don't really know what's what's coming out. I don't really know what's coming out. Just waiting for.
Definitely
It's a very complicated question for me right now to ask.
Yeah, definitely uncertain times with a lot of emotions as well. Hasnain, what would you answer to this?
Let's see what happened.
Yeah, sure. Hasnain, what would your answer to this question be?
So really quickly before I answer that, I want to make a quick correction. The name is Miranair, and she directed The Reluctant Fundamentalist, and I'm confusing them out of his role.
Yeah, I got really confused when you were like, she made the Man of and she made Get Out. I was like, what? I can't let it slide. But...
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I had to correct that because I don't want people to think I don't know anything. To
be fair,
I don't know anything.
I think most of us, except for Carrell, don't know anything. We're just kind of, we're just on this podcast, just saying what we think.
Yeah. So what's next for me? At least it starts at the top. So obviously we need stronger leadership for the country. We also need to change a lot of the policing because it starts from there, and then that once leadership is changed, then that's kind of where the art's going to change, right? That's kind of where it like trickles down into the arts. And then in the arts, from what I'm seeing, is you have a lot of African Americans, Muslims, Indians, Chinese, Korean, people from different ethnicities entering the film industry, at least from an indie perspective. So, I specialize more in the low budget indie film area. But I see a lot of people entering that area, and that's getting me excited because now you have stories from different backgrounds, and I think that when we collectively band together, like my cinematographer, he's Cambodian, right? My writer who assists me on editing, she's Indian, and I have this like very diverse group of people that I work with. I think that's kind of what's next. It's leadership change in the country, followed by a mass infusion of people with different stories coming into the industry.
That's beautiful. Ali, what's next for America? Based on like I said before, like you guys are on the front line. You were at a protest the other day. You're going to be going to more protests as well. Based on what you see in front of you, what do you think is next for America?
Yeah, definitely change in leadership because everything trickles down, like Hasnain said. But also a lot of education needs to happen because a lot of times, even inadvertently, people think that someone of a different color or from a different place than they're better than them. And before I get to the next part, I just wanted to cover this a little bit, that I had no right, or not no right, but I had no say in where I was born, which family, which culture, which what I look like, what my skin color is. I don't think did either, unless you have a special hotline with God.
No, I didn't.
So none of us did, right? So if none of us had that, and we look at somebody else from a different culture, different background, different country, and we point a finger saying that we're better than that person because they're from a certain place or they look like a certain way, I think really what we're doing is pointing a finger at God, saying, yeah, that's not good enough because I'm better. And if we're doing that, we're so narrow-minded. And if we're doing that, we're basically doing what Shaitan did, saying, I'm better because I was made of fire. So I think that needs to change. People need to broaden the way they look at others, regardless of where they're from, regardless of color, skin, and religion, and so on. So having said that, I think what's next is a lot of the movie theaters are going out of business.
So your guys' jobs is done now. So, your careers are over.
I think what's going to happen, a lot of things are going to go online directly, like Netflix is doing right now, or Amazon. They have their own, originals. So that's one. Another thing, I think it's going to be a lot of, like Hasnain mentioned, a lot of small budget indie films that are going to start popping up because people have been getting inspired. They're going to continue to get inspired, and they're going to realize that they have the ability to do the work that the actors do and to produce and do all those things. So I feel like a lot more new people are going to pop up, and it's going to be easier for them.
Okay, I think that was a beautiful
way.
Yes, Assalamu
alaikum. I just want to finish.
Sure.
With a short on with a hadith from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like with all these
talking about this protest right now. A lot of people is protesting right now. So Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, if you propose a matter, reflect on his consequences. If there is good and development, carry it out. But if there is a loss, leave it. Right? So we have to protect, we have to stand against, but we have to reflect on what's next, what's coming up. And like Brother Ali said, we must to get educated. People have to educate about it. So we're going to fight. Okay, let's fight, but wisely, wisdom and knowledge, not like an animal burning and shooting and looting everything.
Very, very wisdomous words, and I think, like I said, I don't envy you guys being in the thick of it, but inshallah, whatever happens, we pray that there is change in America. And I think, like I said before, and in my intro as well, is that I intended for this podcast to be lighthearted and quite fun, which it has been a bit, but at the same time, it's such a heavy topic, and I'm glad that we were able to tackle it. But guys, Ali, Hasnain, Carrell, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And inshallah, we'll see you guys again soon.